Hi, welcome. We're Every Child Matters, a nonpartisan nonprofit pushing to make children a top national election campaign issue.
We're live online today with prominent children and family leaders, as well as grassroots advocates, for a special forum to lift up kids' issues. The forum is Voting for Kids, a conversation on children's health, childcare, paid leave, and ending child poverty. We are coinciding with this week's Republican National Convention, and we'll hear from key party representatives. Every Child Matters does not endorse or oppose any candidate or party. We're asking both parties the same questions. How will they make children central to this year's campaign? If elected, how will they address the serious problems that threaten this country's children and future? So to get our program started, I'll turn it over to our great friend, Myra Jones-Taylor from 0 to 3.
Thank you. Thank you, Brian. And thank you so much for your remarks. And thank you to Senator Joni Ernst and Representative Tom Reed for taking the time to join us today. Thank you to our friends at Every Child Matters and all partners and partner organizations who made this event a possibility and a reality. And thank you to everyone joining us today for this important discussion. Last week, we had an inspiring and engaging conversation to coincide with the Democratic National Convention, and we're excited to come together again today during the Republican National Convention to continue that work. As we kick off our amazing lineup of speakers to address the many issues impacting children and families, I want to raise the plight of babies and toddlers and their families in particular, especially those who are struggling through the pandemic this year and in this country. When 0 to 3 released the State of Babies yearbook earlier this summer, right in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, we found that 42% of babies in the United States live in low-income families, and families that struggle to make ends meet can't always provide the essential ingredients babies need to thrive. In fact, the United States ranks 32nd among 38 nations when it comes to poverty and child poverty. Babies need stable families and strong relationships to grow. But when families struggle with poverty, they struggle to provide basic needs that lead to strong physical and emotional development. An ongoing project led by researchers at the University of Oregon, tracking the pandemic's impact on early childhood development nationwide, found recently that the coronavirus has widened the inequality gap in the United States, and that those who experience structural inequalities, including lower income groups and communities of color, have been hit harder than anyone. COVID has exposed the threadbare systems that support our babies and families and has deepened the childcare crisis we're facing today. Historically, national policies have fundamentally ignored the vital role that families play in our economy. The virus has demonstrated that as a nation, we simply stand on the sidelines while families juggle their jobs and babies and too often feel like they're failing at both while they struggle to make ends meet. As the next administration looks to steer our country out of the pandemic and set us on the path to a full recovery, we are at a crossroads. We can continue along our current path, squandering the potential of an entire generation and jeopardizing our nation's future security and prosperity, or we can invest in what families and babies need to thrive, quickening our recovery while ensuring our next generation of leaders, innovators, and workers can meet their full potential. The COVID-19 pandemic has proven that if families can't work, our economy can't work. The national policies on any subject need to keep our families centered. If we have learned anything these past few months, it's that we can't properly reopen our economy if we don't have safe, reliable child care for working parents. We want to get back to work, but we need to know that our babies are being properly cared for. That's why we've pushed Congress to provide at least $50 billion to the childcare industry to ensure that providers have the means not just to reopen and remain open, but to do it safely. Whoever takes the presidential oath of office next January, we call on him to prioritize building the strong system babies, children, and families need. That means an equitable economic base that bolsters family economic security when children are young and their development is most sensitive. That means paid family and medical leave so that all families can take the time they need to bond with and care for their children, knowing they'll be able to return to their jobs when they're ready. That means providing comprehensive, affordable, high-quality childcare so that we can get parents back to work with the peace of mind they need that their children are safe. And that means transformed pediatric care that supports early development and family well-being. And now, if we put all of our country together, we put them all on the right track, it all starts with our babies. And 0 to 3 looks forward to working with the next administration to think babies and ensure that the potential of every baby is our national priority. Now, I'm happy to introduce our next speaker, Shanita Buckner, an amazing advocate who has represented Texas at 0 to 3's Strolling Thunder.
I'm Shanita Buckner. This is my husband, Jason.
Hello.
This is our rambunctious toddler, Caden. He is 3. And this is our infant son, Cairo, who is 10 months. Jason and I have been married for 5.5 years. We met in college at Texas Tech University. I am the director of project management for a community-based center.
And I'm a sales consultant for an educational content software company.
And we live in Arlington, Texas. Our days start so very early, from as early as sometimes 5 a.m., 6 a.m., and they don't end until the wee hours of the morning. Some nights really very early in the morning. My husband is up at midnight and 1 and 2 o'clock in the morning trying to complete his task because we weren't able or didn't have the opportunity to do it throughout the day because we are caring for 2 small children. With me being on furlough and also not knowing when I'll return to work, if I'll return to work, what our finances will be, that in itself provides another layer of stress for us. Because we don't want to lose our slot at the Learning Center. We spent 3 years on a waiting list for Caden just to get into the center. And now that both boys are there, we want to continue for them to go. We love the center. They love the center. But we are really just uncertain of what is going to happen in this next phase 2 of opening Texas and opening the Learning Center.
Thank you, Shanita. And now welcome our next panelist, the Executive Director of the First 5 Years Fund, Sarah Rittling.
Thank you, Myra. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Sarah Rittling, Executive Director of the First 5 Years Fund, an organization dedicated to ensuring that all children from birth through age 5 have access to affordable, quality care. I'm so thrilled to be here today with all of you. And my goal is to leave you with hope and optimism for what we can achieve. Like everything these days, I have to start with the current pandemic and what it is surfacing with respect to childcare, which is quite simply that it is foundational. Whether it's the high quality experience that sets a child on the path to success, or the very basis from which any economic recovery must rise. We are all living our own personal stories right now. Whether you have children of your own, nieces, nephews, grandchildren, friends, colleagues, or any newspaper on any given day, there quite frankly isn't one of us who isn't witnessing firsthand the essential nature of childcare. While we can hopefully all agree that it is essential, what we knew before the pandemic has now only been exacerbated. Providers operate on razor-thin margins, parents need choices, and there often aren't enough quality choices for them, and quality matters. It's expensive. So expensive, in fact, that it often towers over that of college tuition, which parents have years to save for. Consider these statistics. 67% of children under age 6 in the U.S. have all available parents in the labor force. Approximately 60% of children under age 5 participated in regular weekly care arrangements prior to COVID-19. 72% of women with children participated in the labor force in 2019, and female participation resulted in an addition of approximately $1.7 trillion in economic activity since 1979. Go women. Thanks to the work of brain scientists and economics, we know that high quality is linked to better educational outcomes for children who grow up to power the U.S. economy. Before COVID, childcare challenges cost the U.S. economy $57 billion in lost earnings, productivity, and revenue annually. A recent Bipartisan Policy Center survey showed 2/3 of parents who still need childcare are having difficulty finding it. While most parents know their children in K-12 will have a school to eventually return to, the same cannot be said for parents with children 0 to 5. Nearly 50% of parents are concerned they won't be able to afford care when they return to work. And businesses feel this too. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce Foundation recently found that 40% of employers are concerned that some employees will not fully return to work. Employers believe this is mainly due to both health and safety and childcare. So now what? We tackle the issues prevalent before COVID that were amplified by the pandemic. Affordability, access to quality. We use our shared experiences over the past several months as momentum, and mostly we build on the years of bipartisan support for early childhood education and care that's evidenced in state capitals, governor's suites, halls of Congress. This is an issue of opportunity. This is an issue that will truly make a difference in lives today, and we build a better tomorrow. Now I have the great privilege of introducing, and we will have the outstanding opportunity to hear from a special guest, Senator Joni Ernst of Iowa. Senator Ernst has been instrumental in moving current negotiations forward regarding child care relief. She's leading the fight, and as we all know, she has a speaking role at this week's Republican National Convention. Senator Ernst, welcome. We would like you to respond to one question, which is, what will your party's candidate, and you yourself too, to ensure that issues that affect children are at the center of this year's presidential campaign? And if elected, to ensure that the issues of children's health, child care, paid leave, and ending child poverty are addressed.
Hello, everyone. Folks, there's a lot happening this week at the Republican National Convention. While there are many important issues, we know that we must fight for our children. When I was a girl, I grew up on a small family farm. We wore a lot of hats back then, from taking care of the animals to plowing the fields. Right now, our parents have so many hats: putting food on the table, their career, caring for the family, and now many must play the role of teacher and supply chain manager in these stressful times. Children are taking on new educational environments, from virtual schooling to longer hours at childcare. And while children are resilient, they are very aware of the challenges we face right now. So many children have relied on their school or after-school activities as a way out from abusive or neglectful homes. And without those avenues, they are in critical need of our support and care. In Iowa, we have a child care crisis that began before the pandemic and is only getting worse. I got engaged in the issue after hearing from so many parents how it was nearly impossible to access care in our rural areas. That's why I went to work on a bipartisan basis to get more child care centers up and running using help from the Small Business Administration. And now it's also why I am pushing for us to dedicate at least $25 billion to child care in the next COVID relief package. We also know that the health and well-being of children go hand in hand. That's why I fought for COVID-19 research, vaccine efforts and therapeutics, as well as support for our hospitals, particularly in rural areas where children may be far from treatment options. And it's why I've supported important programs like the Children's Health Insurance Program, or CHIP, and support for additional pediatric research at NIH. I'll always support protections for pre-existing conditions. Both of my siblings are type 1 diabetics, and my nephew has autism. We must ensure our children get the health care they need. Finally, child poverty and a lack of economic opportunity unfortunately go hand in hand. It's important to me that we continue to support economic policies that help rather than hurt working families, from tax relief to time off for new parents. I'm thankful we have been able to have some meaningful progress on the paid parental leave front by allowing federal employees to take this leave, an initiative signed into law by President Trump. But I don't think that only those fortunate enough to work for the federal government should have the option to spend time with their newborn. Our solutions need to work for everyone. Recognizing that 99% of the businesses in Iowa are small businesses, I went to work on a paid parental leave plan that could work for them too. I think my plan is the right one for our country, but there are many creative solutions out there, and I think we can get something done on this issue with the help of folks like you. Thank you for being here and being part of such an important effort. I look forward to working with you to protect our children and look for new and better avenues for them as they pursue their dreams. They truly are America's treasure.
Thank you, Senator Ernst. And now I would love to introduce my colleague at First Focus, the CEO of First Focus on Children, Bruce Leslie.
Thank you, Myra. And I want to thank you for all the great work you do on behalf of our nation's youngest children. And also thanks to the team at Every Child Matters for having me here today. We are living in a moment where it is clear that the future will look quite different than we can have imagined. We're experiencing a public health pandemic, an economic recession, and desperately need to bring our country together to combat vast inequity and systemic discrimination. Every aspect of the lives of children are being negatively impacted by the pandemic and the economic recession. Their voices, concerns, anxiety, hopes, and dreams should be listened to, fully considered, and most of all, addressed. Instead, children are often treated as an afterthought, and far too many of our nation's leaders dismiss their needs under the false belief that children are somehow immune. They're not. The children are not all right. My colleagues have discussed an array of issues that must be addressed for our children. With respect to their health care, even before the pandemic and the recession, the number of uninsured children were rising for the first time in 2 decades. In 2018 alone, the percentage of uninsured children increased by 10%. Unfortunately, that problem has grown as a new report shows that families and children will disproportionately lose their jobs and health care in this pandemic and economic recession. Meanwhile, the American Academy of Pediatrics reports that the number of coronavirus cases in children has risen 90% in just 4 weeks. The children have fallen well behind on their vaccinations, and there we are entering flu season in the near term. None of this is good news. While we want our children to return to school, many of our political leaders are demanding that children, quote, go back to school without having done the necessary work to protect our children, their teachers, and their families from harm by, first, controlling the virus, and second, giving schools the resources and assistance necessary to address the array of interlocking problems necessary to protect the health and safety of students, teachers, and their families. Those who will pay the eventual price of that failure are America's children for years to come. The nation's leaders must work on ways to come out of the current crisis with the hope of a better America and a better world for the next generation. Our national and state leaders must pay attention to and focus on the needs of children and get it right. Our future depends on it. First, our nation's leaders need a plan to cover all kids. We must reverse the recent increase in the number of uninsured children and ensure that all children have health coverage. Second, our nation's leaders must recognize that children are not little adults and that they have unique health needs. When it comes to this pandemic, we must address the fact that children's infection rates are rising, their immunization rates are declining, and that they have increased mental health care needs through this crisis. Third, our nation's leaders must address the need of special populations, such as children in juvenile justice, foster care, homeless children, and children seeking asylum along the border, who are still being placed in cages and are being placed at grave risk. Children also need a coordinated and comprehensive approach to address the challenges impacting every aspect of the lives of children and families. They need what children have in 60 countries across the world, an independent children's commissioner. As President John F. Kennedy said, children are the world's most valuable resource and its best hope for our future.
Thank you so much for that important perspective, Bruce. We'll now hear from Senior Analyst for the National Association for the Education of Young Children, Lucy Rosillo.
Thanks, Myra. I'm so grateful to be here today. Across America, individuals are suffering the devastating blow of the COVID-19 pandemic. And for those who are part of families with young children or who have committed their lives to working with babies, infants, and toddlers, this period comes with a particularly painful reality. The coronavirus pandemic has exacerbated, across all states and settings, the challenges programs were already facing prior to the pandemic, and the child care sector is now on the brink of collapse. Through my role at the National Association for the Education of Young Children, the professional membership organization for the early childhood fields, working to promote high-quality early learning for all young children birth through age 8, I have heard countless stories from child care providers and early childhood educators, similar to the one you will hear from my colleague Tracy Weston in just a few minutes, about the need to have elected officials who understand the importance of early childhood education. But it is not enough to simply understand the importance of high-quality early learning. Our country needs candidates and elected officials who can commit to funding childcare as the public good that it is, so that we can finally have an early learning system that expands opportunities for young children and their families, that expands access to affordable, high-quality childcare where excellence and equity is advanced, and that values early childhood educators as the skills professionals that they are. The reality is that while newspapers and media outlets from across the country have elevated the issues raised by organizations like ours and our more than 60,000 members and 50 affiliates to sound the alarm about the crisis at hand, current elected officials have fallen painfully short in providing this $99 billion industry the substantial, targeted, and state investments needed to stabilize and support child care. Results from a survey we released in July, coupled with results from similar studies from our partners, paint an alarming picture. 40% of child care programs are certain they will close permanently without public assistance. 70% of child care centers are paying more for staff, cleaning supplies, and personal protective equipment. More than 325,000 child care workers have lost their jobs since the pandemic hit. And we are facing a loss of up to 4.5 million child care spaces nationwide as a result of the permanent child care closures caused by the coronavirus pandemic. Now, more than ever, we need candidates who support a comprehensive investment in child care that addresses the reality programs are confronting today and what it needs and what is needed to move beyond this crisis and into a better future for parents, educators, and businesses alike. I'd now like to kick it over to the co-founder of Noah's Ark Preschool Academy of Terrell Incorporated, Tracy L. Weston.
Hello everyone, my name is Tracy L. Weston and I am the proud co-founder of Noah's Ark Preschool Academy of Terrell Incorporated, a child care program serving the rural community of Terrell County in Dawson, Georgia. Since September of 2015, Noah's Ark has been providing quality care for 35 infants and toddlers from 6 weeks to 4 years old. in a county that has an estimated population of 8,500 people. Most of the families of the children I have in my care have limited options of employment and work primarily in fast food restaurants or in local stores, making on average less than $10,000 a year. When I co-founded Noah's Ark, I did not want access to quality child care to be an additional challenge to these families who needed child care in order to work and feed their families. Yet, because of the devastating blow of the COVID-19 pandemic, I am fearful that my program will soon be gone, and with it, our role as the leading child care center in the community. You see, prior to the pandemic, we had expanded our services at Noah's Ark to meet our families' needs, and were providing care to an additional 27 children through an after-school and summer camp program. We were also planning to grow our capacity in order to meet the needs of families who were on our waiting list, but the pandemic has stopped that in its tracks. One of the biggest problems is that Noah's Ark, like so many child care and early learning programs across the country, we were already struggling because before the pandemic hit, we were all too familiar with scraping by to make ends meet, keeping our programs afloat on a shoestring budget, while experiencing all the challenges that are associated with being part of an underpaid and undervalued workforce. Still, despite all this, we remained hopeful for the future of our program. We held on to this hope when we reopened in June after months of being closed. We anchored ourselves in hope for brighter days while we adjusted to a new normal filled with stricter cleaning and sanitation guidelines and greater expenses as we worked to meet them so that parents who needed safe and quality care could have access to it while they went to work. We anchored ourselves in hope even as we heard from families who were too scared to send their children to the child care and were opting instead to keep children home, despite how difficult that choice was for them. We kept and continued holding on to hope. Yet the truth is that not even hope can save us from the reality that we are on the edge of closing our program forever. We teach our children that no one is an island, that it is our responsibility to give back, and today, I come before you asking that you too recognize this reality. Child care providers cannot continue to be alone in this fight. We need candidates and elected officials at all levels, to prioritize child care, to support continued public funding, to keep programs like ours open, and to help us survive this pandemic in order to thrive well beyond it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lucy, and thank you, Tracy, for your words. I know so many of your colleagues across the country share them and appreciate your words. And now it's time to hear from Kimberly Chen from the Children's Defense Fund. Welcome.
Thank you, Myra, and thank you for having us. The Children's Defense Fund has worked for nearly 50 years to hold our country accountable to meet all the needs of all children, from ending child poverty to safeguarding children's health, to meeting the unique needs of children in the child welfare system, and many more. These are issues that have only become more urgent in recent months in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic, which has magnified long-standing racial and economic disparities and the dire need for our nation, including all of our elected officials, to address them. Standing up for children and creating a nation that truly leaves no child behind means ensuring all of our children have access to stable homes, quality health care, ample nutritious food, excellent schools, safe neighborhoods, and access to resources and opportunities that enable them to reach their potential. It means ensuring relief to families now in the face of the COVID-19 public health and economic crisis, but also a commitment to and investment in the policy changes we know are needed to end the shameful child poverty crisis in our country, ensure every child has access to the health coverage and care they need, not just to survive, but thrive, abolish the systemic barriers that hold our children of color back at every step, and ensure that we are supporting and strengthening families and keeping our children safe. We have a lot more we could share today, We would prefer to have you hear directly from one of our young people we're fighting for, and who herself is an advocate for children and families. Kylie Maria Gill is one of CDF's incredible 2019 Beat the Odds Awards recipient, an activist in our community in New York City and a first-time voter. We asked Kylie to share her own inspiring story and her perspective on the change she wants to see in this country, to serve as a reminder to us all of the young lives that are truly at stake in this election. So with that, I will turn it over to my friend, Kylie.
Thank you, Kimberly. Good evening. My name is Kylie Maria Gil. I'm here with the Children's Defense Fund New York as a Beat the Odds alum. I'm currently attending New York University to improve my skills as a writer. This is my first election as a legal adult, and I'm supposed to feel that voting this year is more important than ever. I'm told the future depends on my vote, while also being told that my brain isn't developed enough to make rational decisions. As a first-time voter, one of my biggest challenges is wondering whether or not my vote will have any real impact, whether a new president will help the people of the United States to have better access to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Because there's living life and then there's surviving through it. When you're 7 years old and stressed about if you'll be evicted or even have enough to eat the next day, you quickly learn what it means to survive through life. Despite our difficulties, we cannot lose hope. It's important that we all take action and raise our voices. As an activist, I believe that we must continue to create platforms so that marginalized people can speak up on the issues that affect us all. COVID has exposed the reality of the situation, the reality of spatial and racial inequalities. That's why neighborhoods like Morrisana in the Bronx, New York were hit so hard. A couple days into the pandemic, and no one could deny the obvious disparities. I'll never forget going to pick up my belongings from my dorm in March and only seeing men and women of color on the train, all clearly scared to be going to work and putting their health and that of their family members at risk. It's clear to me that wealth equals power, as demonstrated by many billionaires who have benefited from an epidemic that cost hundreds of thousands of lives. I'm choosing to vote this year because I truly hope that if everyone votes, wealth and money won't determine elections. It's important for us to do everything in our power to make life easier for children who should only be expected to enjoy their youth. Another problem I face is putting down an address with which to receive my ballot. I've had to crash with a friend and her family since May. I'm looking forward to the start of the semester for housing stability, but I question whether schools are ready to face a possible second wave with such malleable regulations. I doubt that the public schools with significantly less resources, specifically in New York City, will have the funding and faculty to sustain an increase in sanitation. Working for the Census Bureau has shown me how inefficient government agencies can be when they're intended to provide support. It's important to invest in accessibility and efficiency. Sorry, that was my phone. It's important to invest in efficiency when it comes to our city and country. I'm choosing to vote so that we can elect a president who agrees with ending child poverty by expanding child tax credits, SNAP, and subsidized housing. It takes hard work to implement positive change, and that's why it happens at such a slow rate. I would like to look back at this difficult time and remember that I was on the right side of history. Please vote and encourage young people to do so as well. It's important to do everything we can to better life for future generations. There's still a lot of work that remains to be done for the children and youth throughout our country, so that they can have access to vital resources and equal opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you, Kylie and Kimberly. It's so important to hear directly from people on the ground and from grassroots. Your testimony from New York is an appropriate, powerful preface for our next special guest, who represents constituents in the U.S. Congress from New York. Congressman Tom Reed has been a key supporter of children and children's issues, as well as a fighter this year for child care funding. Welcome, Congressman Reed. We would like you to respond to the question we've asked office holders of both parties during these national conventions. which is, what will your party, your party's candidate, and you yourself do to ensure that issues that affect children are at the center of this year's presidential campaign? And if elected, to ensure that the issues of children's health, childcare, paid leave, and ending child poverty are addressed.
Thank you for hosting this important discussion on childcare, and I'm wishing everyone a successful convention. I'm thrilled to be kicking off today's conversation. The issue of childcare is one of the most pressing issues facing working families across our district and country today, and therefore glad Republicans are making it a priority going forward. Even before COVID hit our shores, we felt that childcare is an economic, education, and public health issue that demands our full attention. Now, it is abundantly clear that access to childcare is critical to our country's job recovery, particularly now that millions of Americans want to return to work. Unfortunately, this public health and job crisis has hit childcare providers especially hard and reduced access to childcare services for families across America. Many providers in our state of New York are facing an acute set of challenges, having to operate at reduced capacity due to restrictions on class size and other safety and health protocols. Without federal action, some providers may be forced to close their doors for good. We must fix this problem immediately if we are to ensure our nation's children are not left behind. So what can be done? Republicans across the board are ready to build on our long history of standing up for our working families, the working families of the country, and deliver results for them. We have a number of solutions to support the child care provider side of the equation, as well as to ensure more families can utilize the child care services they deserve. For example, earlier this summer, we introduced legislation, the framework of which would provide relief for child care providers to access the resources they need to reopen and stay open. Our bill would provide 9 months of financial assistance to facilities to ensure our communities don't see their local child care sector collapse. These funds would also help providers adapt to the challenges COVID and subsequent health regulations pose, retooling their spaces, sanitizing areas, and hiring more staff. We were and are proud to work with Senator Ernst, Senator Alexander, and other Republicans who have been champions on this issue. From President Trump to Leader McCarthy, Republican leaders have all made it clear that childcare and the needs of the American family are our priorities. We believe there is an important role for policymakers to play in supporting our nation's kids and alleviating the stresses facing American families during these times. We will continue to fight to address the issues of childcare and children's health because our kids represent the best our nation has to offer. Working together, we can ensure that the opportunity that they represent for the next generation is achieved, because our children are going to be the innovators, the entrepreneurs, and the community leaders of tomorrow. And I guarantee you, working together, I have no doubt we will succeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Reed. And now on to our next panelist, the Chief of Staff for Family Values at Work, Sade Moonsamy. Sade?
Thank you so much, Myra. Good afternoon to all the families at home and at work, those of you who raise children, who care for children, and want a better future for our children. My name is Sade Moonsamy, and I am the Chief of Staff for Family Values at Work, a child care and paid leave activist, and most of all, a mom to my 10-year-old daughter, Mia. Family Values at Work is a network of 27 state coalitions working to achieve paid sick and safe days, family and medical leave insurance, and other policies that fight for families at work. Our states have been paving the way for a passage of a national paid leave policy that values this nation's dependence on caregivers and families. Watching my daughter, like many of you with your children at home, and thinking about the millions of children nationwide whose lives have been upended by this crisis underscores for me the need to make our voices heard. We must ensure that our children are focused not just through this election, but consistently. We need to rebuild our childcare infrastructure to ensure the safety and security of our children. And we must pass a robust paid family leave policy now. We are in uncharted territory. Our children's mental and physical health are being impacted by this unprecedented time. Just as families worry, our children also worry about not knowing when they'll go back to school again, when they can go out and play again. Some families have the additional stress of not knowing whether they will be able to return to work or put food on the table due to the lack of a national paid leave and child care policies. As my colleagues mentioned, we know that 4.5 million child care slots are at risk of disappearing, and up to 106 million workers have been left without any guarantee paid leave to deal with this virus, making a recovery even more difficult. My daughter and so many others have benefited from amazing and loving child care providers. But sometimes kids need a parent's care when they first come into our lives, when they're sick or injured, and sometimes we ourselves need time to heal or care for a parent or a loved one. That means passing a comprehensive national paid family leave program now, to give greater economic certainty to families as we work to make it through this pandemic and beyond. This national policy must include 3 priorities. First, this plan must be universal, covering all workers, no matter who they are, where they live, where they work, if they're with a company of 500 or more, or just a company of 5. Second, this must be affordable, with those who earn the least getting all or most of their wages. And third, it must be inclusive so we can care for all of our loved ones, however we define families. This COVID-19 pandemic has laid bare an undeniable truth. What many considered the normal economy wasn't working for most people. The appalling blow to communities of color and disregard for essential workers reflect policies and practices that have existed since our nation's founding. It has laid bare the systemic racist policies that holds our country back from everyone being able to prosper. As state and federal leaders debate the right way to reopen the economy, Family Values at Work calls on those leaders to instead open the door to a new economy, founded on an infrastructure of caring, respect, and equity, and to do their job to support children in this country. I encourage all of you to continue to lift up your voices to ensure children are centered in this election and beyond. I now have the honor to present worker advocate Jerry Sandoval, who will join us to talk about how the passage of a state paid leave program affected him and his family, and why the time is now for our government to pass a paid leave policy that is universal, affordable, and inclusive of all families. Thank you so much.
Hi, my name is Jerry Sandoval, and I am a leader in the San Diego chapter of Parent Voices California, as well as the California Working Family Coalition. 6 years ago, when my daughter was born, I understood the mothers had the right for maternity leave. As a male parent, I didn't know I had the same right. It wasn't until somebody informed me of that such right. When I took paid family leave, it meant the world to me, spending time with my newborn daughter, encountering her new smiles, and as well as helping around the house. When how my daughter changed my life. I had 2 awesome but yet short weeks because of financial reasons. I had to return back to work sooner than expected. I worked for the security department of a privately owned hotel, and like many other people, I live paycheck to paycheck. It was very hard, only receiving 60 to 70% of the pay. That is the main reason I returned back to work. My daughter had to be 3 years old to qualify for child care. It was then that I got involved with Parent Voices and began advocating for child care. At the same time, I got involved with California Working Family Coalition and began advocating for paid family leave. I believe it is very important and essential that we have job protection when we take family leave. Our job status should not change when we return from paid family leave. Thank you very much.
Thank you for your Thank you for your advocacy, Jerry, and thank you to everyone who tuned in today for this important conversation about what this country needs for young children and all children in the country. Thank you to Every Child Matters and all of the partner organizations who made this a reality. Enjoy the rest of the convention.